Once upon a time, the media universe used to be stable. Innovation occurred, if I could get the slide up, innovation occurred at a pace of about once per decade. And even that was too fast. And even that was difficult for us to cope with. So what we're going to do in this panel is we have some case studies, some examples of different organizations and how they're coping with and managing, navigating through this kind of age of chaos. So it's a great pleasure for me to bring to you Sébastien Leon from Mars, the Mars Lab. Those of you who've heard, you'll hear a little bit more about it. Mars has done a really good job at both bookends in terms of both having a lab-based approach to gain a lot of deep insight, but also using a lot of single source data to try to understand its impact then in field. We also have Chris Bacon from Gallo Wines. Now, Gallo has been doing insight and innovation in advertising. The ARF has been doing it, I think, for 76 years. Chris's organization has been doing it for 80. And from its outset, they really embraced kind of the whole idea of doing research and gaining innovation in their game. So if I can get my slides up now. So again, the pace of change was very, very, very slow. And what that meant from a research perspective was if you understood what was happening yesterday, you understood what was going to happen tomorrow. Because the world of tomorrow was like the world of yesterday. And the types of methods that that gave rise to were things like surveys, like focus groups, because even though they may not have been purely accurate, you would develop proxies for what those scores really meant and what they represented. And so you're able to situate it. But the problem now is the pace of change is very, very, very rapid. What did it mean to use a mobile phone for media consumption 2 years ago? You know, how has it changed in 2 years, in 1 year? What will it be next year? And in that environment, making assumptions is incredibly dangerous. So we need new methods. You need methods that are not historical in character, but which really understand the effects of variables and how those variables ultimately translate into the market. So it's a much, much, much greater demand on us as researchers. And what we're seeing is this confluence of many trends playing out at the same time. Perpetual increase in the number of channels available to consumers, as a result, fragmentation of the audience, the continual and perpetual rise of new platforms, now moving to the wrist, the shift in power to viewers who have increasing control over what they watch, how they watch it, increasing demands on the part of advertisers for growing accountability around their media spend, less dedicated viewing. What does the viewing mean in that kind of environment? Growing competition, more and more people, adding more clutter to the environment. And of course, you have this now this new rise with social media. And all of this is facilitated by this acceleration that is occurring with this revolution, this whole digital revolution. And so what you have is this confluence of trends. Not one trend, many trends, all playing out and acting out at the same time. So we're going to talk today on our panel about this culture of innovation. And specifically, we're going to talk about 3 drivers. Your access to resources that you need to navigate through the chaos, good systems so that particularly you can act on the insights that you get, and good people who can really drive your innovation. And each of these is important in different ways. So for example, with resources, some of those resources will be internal, some will be external. For example, organizations like the Disney Media Networks, have a lab. Many networks do now. That's obviously a large investment. It costs a lot of money. Not everybody has a lot of money. Some of you are from organizations which can't even spend $5,000 on a research initiative. And I thought a lot about you today, so I have a gift that I'm offering all of you. If you come from an organization where you don't have the budget for a lot of good research, if you go to the Beyond 30 stand, which is at the end of the exhibition style, we have a decision maker for you. And you can click the decision maker and it will make your decision for you. And this is probably better than some of the research that's out there in circulation, because at least this has the probability of random chance. So go ahead and feel free to get your decision maker. But otherwise, you want to be thinking about how to take, even if you have a small resource, how to make sure that you put that resource to good use. So one example is a CPG company. I won't name them, but I'm actually really impressed with what they've done. They didn't have budget. They couldn't spend. They managed to muss together about $50,000. And in their building, they built a little lab, which was just an eye gaze system. That's all they have. One staff member, one eye gaze system. And what they do is they test their packaging on their employees. Now, that's not great, but it's better than nothing. There are many problems which they have detected, which are human factor issues, which they'll pick up in that very modest investment. There are university consortia. Beyond 30 is one, but there's the Ehrenberg-Bass, for example, initiative with Wharton. There's the MIT Media Lab. There are a number of innovations. There's the ARF. And what these do is these allow you to take modest spends and collaborate together to tackle these spaces. But whatever it is you do, whether it's internal or external, you have to allocate resource to innovation. If you don't allocate resource, then it's not going to happen. So that's the first key. The second is you have to have systems. Now, you have to have some way of systematically challenging your assumptions. And it may be that you do strategic workshops. It may be that you have some type of lab initiative, some single source initiatives, some big data. Whatever it is, you have to translate that into an actual system and not just one-off ad hoc initiatives. And a couple of examples of this in the Beyond 30 Consortium, we had a number of members on the Disney side, for example. There was Artie Bulgren and Mark Lowney at ABC who conspired together with this vision that said, wow, the research that's happening in this university initiative is great. We need this in our day-to-day business. And they worked within their systems to get the energy and the momentum and the money that was needed to fund the Disney Lab. At the same time, people like Helen Katz and Tracy Shabak at Starcom MediaVest were looking at this saying, this is great, we need to systematize this within our organization. And so they put together the pool lanes. So people have been taking the initiatives and they've been thinking larger than the initiatives. How can we systematize what this is, what's happening here into our day-to-day business? And then finally, you need people. I think one of the best things about initiatives that you take that are around innovation is it allows you to discover who within your organization are the innovators. Not everybody is an innovator. It takes a certain aptitude to be the type of person who will have a passion for change. And that's not something you can just assign to someone. When you take an initiative, it floats those people to the top. You find those people within your own organization. And likewise, it's not every decision maker who's able to act on those insights. And you also discover in senior management who the key people are who are really going to have the capacity to embrace the change. So that's a little bit of setup. Each of us will present just a few minutes on how we're approaching innovation. Very quickly, our philosophy in both organizations, at the University Lab and at the Disney Lab, is to make sure that we have our toolbox. We don't want to be passionate about any one tool. We want to make sure that we have the capability to find the right tool for the right task. Sometimes we use surveys because surveys are the right measure. Sometimes we use eye gaze because eye gaze helps us understand what's happening where. We use biometrics. We draw on facial coding. We draw on reaction time testing, which is implicit association measurement, and very rarely we'll also draw on EEG. And the reason I say rarely is because usually I can do what I need with all the other tools. EEG is our last resort. And then in Beyond 30, what we've done is we've created a consortium approach so that everybody comes together once a year and we ask the group, what are your priorities for this year? What are 6 research questions that we can tackle this year collectively together? And that way everybody pulls up some funding together and we tackle different research questions. So I want to give an example of how that works in practice. Gail was talking a lot about mobile and, and new initiatives within the ARF around mobile. So in Beyond 30, we did our first mobile study in 2006. At that stage, at that time, there were no mobile phones in the market that could actually handle video. So we saw that this was coming, and to figure out what its effect might be, we had to actually use an iPod Classic. So the very first study that we did to test this actually used an iPod Classic to see what the effect would be of video on a very, very small screen. And the big surprise discovery in 2006 was that all screens were equal, that the impact of a video ad seen on an iPod, seen on a PC screen, or seen on a TV was absolutely the same. We replicated that study in 2008, this time using a mobile phone. Note it was a small little Nokia with a very small screen. And again, we found exactly the same results. We tested this across a range of ad models with clutter, pre-roll, mid-roll. We found exactly the same results. Recently, in 2012, last year, we replicated this study for ESPN. Looking now across 4 platforms, we find exactly the same thing. So what we discover is it's not screen size that makes the difference. It's really what you do with the screen. That's something that we have found since 2006. And organizations like ESPN were able to capitalize on that insight early and make sure that they were investing in the mobile space. I mean, even to this day, I think mobile is still undervalued because people don't appreciate its true potential. So the other area where I get to practice a lot of my innovation is at the Disney Media and Advertising Lab. And real quick, just an example. The lab is a dedicated facility. We have living rooms and we have theaters with all these different measures that we've talked about. And just an example, we've done lots of studies looking at the effects of brand integrations. And the way that we do this is we have to isolate the variable. So we isolate the brand integration. So we produce the program with and without the integration, where a truck will pull in with the department store logo on the side. We either rotoscope it or we substitute it with another shot at that spot. And we see what the effect is of the ads with or without the integration. Here you see that purchase intent lifts very, very considerably. Just with 4 seconds, just 4 seconds of brand integration in a 1-hour program produces this huge effect. But what the biometrics do is they tell us why. And so what we see in this particular case is there were 3 ad exposures in the 1-hour program, and the gray bar, which is without the integration, each time people habituate to the ad, they've seen the ad before, they're just a little bit less engaged. But where they had the brand integration, the saliency of the brand is maintained, and so what's happening is it's actually the ad that is performing better. So brand integrations work not so much on the cinema paradigm of the lift they provide. They work because they change the audience disposition to the subsequent ad exposure. It's a completely different way of understanding how brand integrations work. And we only got there because we had the biometrics to inform that insight. So just some quick examples. So if you have any questions for me, please feel free to email me or link me in or something. Now it gives me great pleasure to introduce you to Sébastien Leon from Mars, who will share some of the innovations at the Mars Lab and Single Source. Thank you.
Thank you, Duane.
All right.
Thank you. Okay, so you can probably see that I'm not Laurent Larguina, so they try to find a French guy with a last name starting by A, L, and so they find me. So that's the reason why I'm with you today. So I couldn't resist to share with you that Mars has been awarded this Cannes Lions for being the best advertiser of the year. That's an opportunity for me to bring a little bit of France with me. And also that's probably my last chance to celebrate this award with you because we will have a new winner for the 2013 in a few days. So let's enjoy it now. What I would like to say is that I often compare the insight function with the navigation system you have in your car. When you know where you want to go, you need to drive the business safely, accurately, and potentially with the lowest consumption of gas. That's what we try to do. And when it's about advertising, we have basically 2 research areas. The first one is communication. And as you can see with some of our biggest brands, we have been pretty good to deliver often good ads, sometimes great campaigns. And recently, we have distillated a little bit more the cognitive science learning to understand better what triggers attention, emotion, and above all, memorization. But it's fair to say that on the second field of research, which is media, we have struggled a lot. And this is where there's a risk of chaos. Because if you are not able to give strong and clear direction to your marketers, we know that marketers are not very disciplined. Okay, so that's a check for them to test everything. And after a couple of years, you will be in a very bad situation in terms of P&L. So we tried really to fill the gaps with the Insight team. And we were very lucky because at Mars we have an internal think tank which name is Catalyst, and we build on this best practice to answer these gaps. So what I would like to share with you is the 3 initiatives we started with. The first one, when you don't know where you are, you start to know what you know. And that has been a tremendous success for us because we avoid people really activating some myth in our business. So we were really looking for repeatedly successful, proven recipes. And that really helped us to avoid, for instance, bold statements like, we are going to divert 30% of our media budget in digital, for instance. So we have been very cautious at start. And then we also acknowledged that we needed some assistance and some help. So Duane mentioned some of the initiatives for us to strengthen our links with the academic world. We started, for instance, with the Hornbeck-Bass Institute in Australia to really make sure we were driving the right levers to grow brand. It was a little bit of overall system. Then we contributed with Wharton to this Future of Advertising initiatives because it's about understanding our ecosystem generally. And then we also try to get the best of the big data management with the MIT Media Lab, where we have a series of programs, one being, for instance, on how we can translate biometrics and facial recognition in our research. And finally, obviously, we made a huge workload with our key research institute partner in the area of cognitive science with Ipsos, but also in single source with Nielsen and GfK. What I would like to share now is really what we captured during our journey. The first one, and that has been a very big decision for us, was in these times where everything is floating, we kept our measure engine internally. And the reason for that is because sometimes you have to cope with very different data sources depending on where you are. So for instance, in single source, it can be a town test, like it is in France. It can be a national panel, like it is in Germany or UK, for instance. But it can be also a loyalty program database, like it is, for instance, in US so far. So you need to be sufficiently agile to adapt to these different local sources. The second one is the fact that all our organizations have a limited propensity to accept change. So when you are coming with innovation, and especially new disruptive methodologies, it's very important you embed these methodologies in existing decision process. Because if you are disrupting everything at the same go, it's really a plan for failure. And finally, and Duane referred to that with his decision maker clicker, you need to learn how to fail cheaply. When you are asking a president of a segment, either it's PETCARE or chocolate, to divert some of his money in research and research program, it's a big call. Especially because sometimes the results will occur only in 18 months, sometimes 2 years. So that's a big call for them. So you need to have a very targeted and very precise system and programs to make sure that you can manage expectation. So does it work? Well, when we started our journey in 2005, in fact, we are delivering return on investment below the category average. After 5 years, we are now systematically delivering over the average return on investment for big categories, and I'm just mentioning only chocolate and PETCARE in this example. So in terms of big data, we made the case. But more interestingly, I think we get more buying from the general manager. So we started our journey with a single source in Europe, in France, UK, and Germany. And then we expanded in US and Australia. We are now in China. And we have plans to expand also in Japan and in Russia, which will be one of our biggest country of experimentation for the developing world. So this is where we are. I think the feedback from the business has been great. And on this basis, we have now 3 platforms. One on communication, we're still learning. second one on media, and we have initiated a new one on shopper insight. We call this the 1 second decision because it's obviously very important in nowadays. So this was my case, and I'm very glad now to welcome Chris.
Well, thank you, Sébastien. And I'm going to put the clicker aside. I have no slides. I don't have the investment in creating new systems and new metrics like Duane and Sébastien. We're a small little winery in the central part of California. Yes, we've been around for 80 years, and yeah, I guess we are the largest privately owned, family-held winery in the world, and we have the #1 brand of wine in the United States in Barefoot Wine and Barefoot Bubbly, and our newest Barefoot Refresh, and I encourage you all to go out to your local store and try them. I think you'll like it. But despite that success, the chaos that we had at Gallo last year, think of it this way. I think of chaos as that multitude of voices. And for me, it was the multitude of voices that said, Hispanic consumers don't drink wine. Okay, so let me ask, do we have any Hispanic or Latino people in the audience today? And how many of you drink wine? Thank you very much. Okay, so my management would say to me, Hispanics don't drink wine. Oh, Hispanics only drink sweet wine. Hispanics only drink beer. Hispanics only drink tequila. You can only speak to Hispanics in Spanish. No, you speak to them in English. I'm like, okay, wait a minute, stop. The point is that we did have some information. And of course, there's lots of information available on the internet. And I was fortunate in that I had a couple of marketing VPs who said, look, let's learn. So I had one marketing VP who said, look, I want to know where my brand stands. So I said, okay, fine, we'll do a tracking study. I had another VP who said, look, I want to know some of the attitudes and behaviors. So I said, great, okay, we'll do an attitude and usage study. So we had both of these studies in the field, and I had a brainstorm, and I said, wait a minute, I'm thinking about this too small. So the innovation for us was to say, look, how do I take tactical pieces of learning and bundle it into something that is much more strategic? How do I take something which would seem quite small and make it really a piece of fundamental, foundational strategic learning? So what we did was I said, okay, wait a minute. Here's what the key questions are. I've got people asking, what's the size of the prize? What are people doing now? What are the barriers? What's keeping them from enjoying wine? And that ties back into what's their motivations? Who are they? And who is this audience? And how do I get to understand them better? So what we did was we tied together our tracking learning. We tied together our attitude and usage work. I brought in friends from the ARF, David Burgos, who is not here today, but leads the multicultural work at Millward Brown, and my co-chair on the Multicultural Forum for ARF. I said, David, come talk to us. What are the best practices? He said, sure, love to. Jerry Yang from the US Census, I called him and said, hey, we need to understand size of prize. Great, I'll be there. We put together a half-day forum, got all of our marketing people, shopper marketing, salespeople in a hotel ballroom like this. But it wasn't about presentations, okay? It was about bringing the consumer to life. I think we saw it in Bob's video, and we saw it in Soledad's video yesterday. We got to remember that behind all this data are people. So what we did, in addition to presentations, is that around the room, we set up little stations. We had continuous video going on of celebrities and food and music from Mexico and Cuba and Puerto Rico. And it was just all about trying to bring the Hispanic consumer to life for my audience. Because they like to see, they like to touch, they like to feel. So that was the other thing that made this work, is that I understood, and you have to ask yourself, how does my audience learn? And what's going to make them activate that learning? And the third thing we did is this. After we did a half-day session, we entertained, we engaged, We then sat down one-on-one with folks and held their hands and said, what did you learn? What other questions do you have? Now, what are you going to do with it? So it may not be as sexy as a lab or as robust as the Mars work, but I hope it's something that you can take back to your office and do maybe tomorrow or the next day and think about, how can I innovate in how I'm communicating, how I engage, and how I get my audience to activate learning? Because if I can bring that learning to life, then I've got a better chance that somebody's going to do something with it than just sit on a shelf and gather dust. And I think that will all make us feel a lot more satisfied, right? So I think with that, we had a couple of conclusions, right, Duane?
Yeah, we can. We can jump to the conclusions.
Yeah.
So actually, we have a few seconds for some discussion.
Shall we?
Yeah.
Okay.
Come join in. So I think what Chris and Sébastien, both of you have done so well is that it's one thing to get the insights, and it's one thing to get the systems in place to get insights.
Yep.
But then there's a question, what do you do with the insights? And how do those insights then translate into action? And how do you then inspire confidence for continued buy-in from your management? So maybe both of you could speak just a little bit about how you have succeeded in getting your insights translated into the arena of action.
Go
ahead.
Okay. So in fact, when I mentioned communication and key beliefs, that's our best way for us to activate these insights. So we have at least once a year a panel with people from our media agency, our creative agency, our insight function, the scientists we have, our internal think tank, and we just update what we know. And the outcome of this is really a very fact books about what you need to do, what are the really very robust results we can translate in decisions. So it's very funny because we are using flags. So we have green flags and red flags. And so if everybody has a green flags, it means that yes, we are going to update our document. And if we have some red flags, it means that we need to have more robust data, because sometimes people are coming with one insight from one country in one category. That's relatively limited. But it's a good candidate for other business units to test and learn. So at the end of the day, our activation program is really captured in this document we are using. And we have center of expertise who are in charge of the decision-making process. So we are sure that there's a connection between both.
Yeah. And I'll give another example. Hopefully some folks in the room have enjoyed some of our Moscato wines from Barefoot and Gallo family vineyards. And it's been a growth engine for us. And our audience internally said, look, what's the future? What's the upside for Moscato? So we did, again, standard usage and attitude study, understand the behaviors. But we realized that if we just presented it, it was going to sit there. So we got the key players in the room. We presented as in a traditional PowerPoint. Our research partners, Market Tools, presented the learning. But like we did yesterday at lunch, we gave everybody a sticky pad. And we said, look, write down the things that you either didn't know or that you want to know more about or you think you can take action with. And so then what we did after about 45-minute presentation, collected up all the sticky notes, posted them on the wall, and then my research manager and I, we went through, we told everybody, look, take 5 minutes. We bucketed everything, themed them, and said, here are the key things that you're all talking about. Now, what are we going to go do about this? What are we going to go do about our consumer target, our brand, our line extension strategy? And basically that learning laid out a roadmap for the brands for the next 2 years worth of growth, and not just the brands, but then we translated it into sharper marketing programs, in category management, in shelf management activities. So it was that type of engagement which got people to say, I know what to do.
Fantastic. So we're going to leave you with a couple of parting thoughts. So if I get the slide back up. We're going to leave you with a couple of questions that each of you should go back maybe to your own organizations kind of to think about. So the first question is, what resources, both kind of internal and external, can you marshal to gain the appropriate insights that you're going to need? And again, don't think about that as necessarily being expensive. It may be that it may not be a function of cost. It's just think about what all the different kinds of resources are that you can marshal together. How can you then develop systems? So systems are really about inputs and outputs. How are you going to gain the insights? How are you going to take those insights and actually effectively apply them so that you don't just have one-offs? Who are your key innovators? Who are the key people within your organization who are really going to be passionate about driving change? And how can you then support those people? One of the things that really inspires me about like ESPN, when you look at the culture on the inside, Artie has done such a fantastic job in getting good people, but more importantly in supporting them and empowering them to be able to go out there and achieve great things. And then how will you win the buy-in? What strategy? That's your audience. Your audience is your management. How are you going to persuade your management? How do you translate these insights into key points that they're going to be able to walk away with? And then finally, how do you act on the insights you gain? What are your strategies to make sure that your insights don't gain dust, but they actually kind of find application in the real world? Yeah. And hopefully with these questions, thank you very much. We're out of time. Thank you.